I was halfway through training the most stubborn golden retriever I'd ever encountered when my life changed forever. There I stood in the Washington Museum's Grand Hall, surrounded by ancient treasures while Vega, my canine trainee, decided to make a mockery of 3 years of guide dog expertise by lunging toward a school children's tour group. "Vega, heel," I commanded, feeling the leather leash burn against my palm as she pulled. 20 museum patrons turned to stare, and the certification evaluator scribbled furiously on his clipboard. This damn dog was going to cost me my perfect training record. I could already picture my boss's disappointed face. "Trinity Henderson, you've never failed to place a service dog until now." The thought made my stomach clench as the scent of furniture polish and musty artifacts filled my nostrils. That's when Vega yanked with surprising strength, dragging me directly into the path of a woman moving confidently with a white cane. The collision was spectacular, her exhibition program sailing through the air while I stumbled forward, grabbing her shoulders to keep us both upright. Her sunglasses clattered to the marble floor, revealing unseeing green eyes that somehow still managed to look annoyed. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, heat rushing to my cheeks. "My trainee is having an off day." The woman's fingers found my wrist with surprising accuracy. "Either that, or she's trying to tell you something." Her voice carried a warmth that contradicted her initial expression. "I've never been tackled in the Egyptian exhibit before. Usually save that for the dinosaurs." I couldn't help but laugh as I retrieved her sunglasses. "Trinity Henderson, guide dog trainer currently failing spectacularly at her job. Paige Baker, museum curator currently being accosted by rogue canines." She tilted her head, a strand of dark hair falling across her face. "Wait, are you with Guiding Light Services? The dog training program?" The knot in my chest loosened slightly. "That's me, though today might be my last day if this evaluation goes any further south." "Fascinating coincidence. I've been on their waiting list for 6 months." Her fingers still hadn't left my wrist, and I noticed her nails were painted a deep burgundy that matched the scarf draped around her neck. "My current dog is retiring soon." Before I could respond, Vega suddenly settled, sitting perfectly at attention between us as if she'd never misbehaved a day in her life. The evaluator approached, eyebrows raised in silent judgment. "Miss Henderson, I've seen enough." "Sir, I can explain," I began, but he raised a hand. "Remarkable recovery. The dog sensed Miss Baker's condition immediately upon contact. That's exactly the intuition we look for." I blinked in disbelief as he continued making approving notes. "You were testing at the Special Exhibits Wing?" Paige asked once he walked away, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The one with the Bastet sculptures?" "Yes. How did you know?" Her lips curved into a knowing smile. "Those exhibits are designed to be touched. They contain traces of catnip to preserve the leather components." She patted Vega's head with unerring precision. "Your dog wasn't misbehaving. She was following her nose to what she thought was a giant cat." I stared at this woman, blind yet seeing more than I had. The late afternoon light filtering through the skylight caught the subtle gold flecks in her green eyes. "Do you believe in fate, Trinity Henderson?" she asked, her hand now extended for Vega to sniff. The question hung between us, as museum visitors flowed around our little island of stillness. Something about the way she said my full name made my chest tighten. "I believe in observable patterns," I replied, professional mask slipping back into place. She smiled, a small knowing curve of her lips. "Then perhaps you'll appreciate this pattern. I've been seeking a new guide dog, you're training them, and your rebellious student just introduced us." The museum announcement system chimed softly, announcing closing in 30 minutes. Paige reached into her bag and retrieved a business card, offering it with surprising accuracy. "Call me if you'd like to discuss Egyptian mythology or disobedient dogs," she said. "I'm particularly interested in Anubis, the guide of souls." As she turned to leave, her cane tapping rhythmically against the floor, I looked down at Vega, who wagged her tail as if she'd accomplished exactly what she'd intended. I couldn't possibly have known then that Vega hadn't failed her training at all. She'd simply recognized what I needed before I did, a skill that would eventually make her the perfect match for the woman who would change everything I thought I knew about sight and blindness. I stood outside Paige's apartment building for 10 minutes before finally pressing the intercom. It had been 2 weeks since our museum collision, and after several phone conversations, I'd offered to assess her living space for a new guide dog companion. "Trinity?" Her voice crackled through the speaker. Third floor, apartment 304. The elevator smelled of pine cleaner and someone's forgotten takeout. I gripped the leather handle of my training bag tighter, wondering why my palms were sweating. This was a professional consultation, something I'd done hundreds of times before. When the door opened, I was greeted by Apollo, Paige's current guide dog, a dignified black lab with graying muzzle. Behind him stood Paige, barefoot in jeans and an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder. "You smell like rain and coffee," she said by way of greeting, a smile playing at her lips. I laughed, surprised. Storm caught me walking from the car. The coffee was necessary survival equipment. Her apartment was meticulously organized. Everything in its place, labels in braille on nearly every container. The furniture was arranged to create clear pathways, with nothing protruding to create obstacles. "You've got a perfect setup here," I said, noting the specialized feeding station for Apollo. 8 years of trial and error. Paige led me through her space with confidence. After the accident, I had to relearn everything. I watched her fingers trail along the edge of a bookshelf, lined with both braille volumes and regular books. "You still keep printed books?" "I used to be an art history professor before." She gestured vaguely toward her eyes. "Some things are hard to let go of." The weight of that statement hung between us as Apollo settled at her feet with a deep sigh. "He's tired," I observed. "How old is he now?" 10. "We've been together since right after my accident." She knelt to stroke his head, movements full of affection. "The museum hired me as a consultant on their accessibility programs. Apollo has walked those halls with me thousands of times." I pulled out my tablet, creating a profile for Paige's needs. "Tell me about your daily routine, the challenges Apollo helps with." For the next hour, we mapped her life. The morning walks, the bus routes to the museum, the grocery store with the clerk named Maurice who always described the fresh produce, the coffee shop where the baristas identified themselves by name. "You've created quite a system," I said admiringly. "Systems keep me independent. Independence keeps me sane." She moved to the kitchen, filling a kettle without using a water gauge. "Tea?" I watched her confident movements. "How do you know when it's full?" "Wait, sound, the way water creates resistance," she smiled. "Not everything requires specialized tools when you've been doing it long enough." While the water boiled, I explained our training process. "I'd like to bring a few candidates for you to meet next week. The dog needs to match your pace, energy level, and temperament. Like dating, but furrier," she joked. The kettle whistled, and she prepared 2 mugs with practiced efficiency. When she carried them over, her hand extended the mug with careful precision. "A little to the left," I guided, and our fingers brushed as I took the mug. Something electric passed between us in that brief contact. Her fingers lingered against mine a moment longer than necessary, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks before remembering she couldn't see my reaction. "Tell me about you," she said, settling onto the couch. "The woman who trains animals to be someone's eyes." I shifted uncomfortably. "Not much to tell. Grew up with a veterinarian father, always had a knack with animals." "That's what you do, not who you are," she pressed. No client had ever asked me this before. They were usually focused on their future companion, not the trainer. "I live alone. Have a brother staying with me temporarily. My apartment is nowhere near as organized as yours." I paused. "I spend most of my time with dogs because they're easier than people." She laughed, the sound warming the space between us. "Honesty, I like that." We spent another hour discussing the temperaments of different breeds. When I started demonstrating harness grips using her coffee table as a prop, she moved closer. "May I?" she asked, her hands hovering near mine. I guided her fingers to the proper position. Her touch was warm, her fingers slender and strong. When she adjusted her grip, her thumbs brushed across my wrist, lingering there just long enough to send a flush of warmth through me. "Like this?" she asked softly. Our faces were inches apart. I could smell her shampoo, something with lavender, and for a wild moment wondered what it would be like to close that distance. "Perfect," I managed, pulling my hands away abruptly. "You're a natural." As I packed up my materials, Apollo patted over and rested his head on my knee, eyes wise and knowing. "He likes you," Paige said. "He doesn't do that with just anyone." Standing at her door to leave, I hesitated. I'll see you next Thursday for the introductions. I'll be here, she smiled. Though technically I won't be seeing you. I groaned at the pun. Dog trainer humor is my territory. Her laughter followed me into the hallway, and I found myself smiling all the way to my car, even as rain began to fall again. Only when I was halfway home did I realize I had forgotten to note her schedule on Thursdays, a rookie mistake I hadn't made in years. Our weekly museum visits had become the highlight of my schedule. Today marked our third consecutive Thursday exploring the Greek and Roman wing, Paige's suggestion after we'd thoroughly dissected the Egyptian exhibits. The official guide completely misses the subtle differences in these burial urns, Paige said, her fingers hovering just above the display glass as I described the artifacts. Their audio description calls this decorative etching, but these are mourners' signatures. I leaned closer to examine what I'd overlooked dozens of times before. How can you tell? Because I studied these exact pieces before my accident. She smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. I wrote my dissertation on funerary customs across Mediterranean cultures. Apollo sat patiently as we moved from display to display. I'd begun to recognize the subtle shift in Paige's posture when something genuinely excited her, the slight forward tilt of her head, the quickening pace of her words. You should be leading these tours, I said, watching her fingers trace the air above a marble statue, remembering what her eyes could no longer see. Maybe someday. She linked her arm through mine as we walked, a gesture that had become natural between us. For now, I enjoy having my private guide. The casual intimacy of her touch still made my pulse quicken, though I'd grown accustomed to our physical proximity, guiding her through crowded spaces, describing exhibits with her shoulder pressed against mine. Trin! A male voice echoed across the marble hall. I turned to see my brother Liam jogging toward us, his backpack slung haphazardly over one shoulder. Liam, what are you doing here? I checked my watch. Shouldn't you be in school? He shrugged, 17 years of practice nonchalance. Half day, teacher conferences. His eyes shifted curiously toward Paige. Paige, this is my brother Liam, the one I mentioned is staying with me. I turned to him. Liam, this is Paige Baker, the museum curator I'm working with. The one you won't shut up about at breakfast? He asked with teenage bluntness. Heat rushed to my face. I talk about all my clients, I said quickly. Paige extended her hand in Liam's general direction, smiling. Nice to meet the infamous brother. Trinity says you're quite the artist. Liam's perpetual cool facade cracked slightly at the compliment. I draw sometimes. Nothing special. He's being modest, I interjected. His teachers say he could get a scholarship if he'd stop skipping classes. Not this again, Liam groaned. Why don't you join us? Paige suggested. We're headed to the special exhibition on Roman architecture. To my surprise, Liam agreed. As we toured the exhibits, something remarkable happened. Liam actually engaged, asking questions about the engineering principles behind Roman arches and aqueducts. Paige answered each query with the perfect balance of expertise and accessibility. How do you know all this if you can't see the displays? Liam finally asked, with the direct curiosity only teenagers possess. I started to reprimand him, but Paige laughed. Valid question. I memorized most of these collections before losing my sight. Plus, good museums have tactile models. She tapped her temple. The rest is up here. Later that evening, Paige insisted we join her for a department dinner party celebrating the museum's new acquisition. Nothing formal, she assured us. Just colleagues and pizza. The gathering was held in a private room at the back of the museum. 8 people greeted us warmly, clearly fond of Paige. I noted the ease with which she navigated both the space and the social dynamics, introducing us to each person with perfect recall of their specialties and interests. So you're the dog trainer. A woman named Elena clasped my hand. Paige talks about your museum tours constantly. I'm just filling in details she already knows, I demurred. Don't be modest, Paige called from across the room, her hearing apparently selective and sharp. Trinity sees things even our curators miss. I watched her move confidently through the space, Apollo guiding her between conversation groups. Despite knowing her just over a month, something about her felt intimately familiar, as if we'd known each other in some previous life. How long have you two been together? Asked the man serving drinks beside me. Oh, we're not. I started. She's training my new guide dog, Paige explained, suddenly appearing at my elbow. And they say romance is dead. He laughed. Meeting through work is so modern. Neither of us corrected him. The assumption hung in the air between us, creating an electricity I couldn't quite name. Later, as Liam helped carry empty plates to the kitchen, Paige and I found ourselves momentarily alone in a quiet corner. Your brother is struggling with something beyond typical teenage rebellion, she said softly. I sighed. Our parents are going through a messy divorce. He was caught vandalizing school property last month, so he's staying with me until things cool down. Her hand found mine in the darkness, her thumb tracing small circles on my palm. You're good with him. Patient. I'm better with dogs than teenagers, I joked. You underestimate yourself, she said. Her fingers intertwined with mine briefly before Apollo nudged her leg, signaling someone's approach. As we left the museum that night, Liam walking slightly ahead, Paige whispered, "Bring him again next week. The Egyptian wing has an architectural exhibit he might enjoy." I watched her climb into her rideshare, Apollo settling beside her, and felt an ache I couldn't define. This was professionally inappropriate, these growing feelings for a client. Yet standing in the cool evening air, watching her car disappear into Washington traffic, I couldn't imagine our Thursday ritual ending when her guide dog training was complete. The crack of thunder rattled my windows as I sat reviewing training logs. 2 months had passed since meeting Paige, and we'd finally settled on her new guide dog, a mild-mannered black Labrador named Athena, who'd formed an immediate bond with her. The final training sessions were scheduled for next week. My phone vibrated against the coffee table. Paige's name lit up the screen. Trinity? Her voice trembled over the line. I'm sorry to call so late. I sat up straight, instantly alert. What's wrong? It's Apollo, the storm. Another thunderclap punctuated her words. He's panicking. I can't calm him down. I'll be right there. I scribbled a note for Liam, who was asleep in the guest room, grabbed my emergency kit, and dashed through the downpour to my car. Older service dogs sometimes develop storm anxiety, but this timing was problematic. Apollo needed to help Paige until Athena's training was complete. 20 minutes later, I was soaked to the bone and standing at her apartment door. When it opened, Apollo bolted toward me, trembling violently. He knocked over a lamp and my coffee table, Paige said, her hair disheveled. I've never seen him like this. I knelt, examining the frightened dog while rain pounded against the windows. His pupils are dilated, but I don't see any injuries. Working quickly, I administered a mild sedative from my emergency kit and guided Apollo to his bed in the corner. Paige stood nearby, arms wrapped around herself, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice small. I didn't know who else to call. That's what I'm here for. I touched her arm gently. Let me clean up the broken lamp while the medication takes effect. As I gathered shattered ceramic from the floor, Paige made her way to the kitchen with practiced steps. Tea, or something stronger? I think we both could use it. Something stronger sounds perfect. She returned with 2 glasses of amber liquid. Bourbon, my father's recipe for emergencies. We settled on the couch, the storm raging outside while Apollo's breathing finally steadied into sleep. I feel helpless when he's frightened, she admitted, sipping her drink. He's always been my strength. He's getting older, it happens. I watched the rain trace patterns down her windows. But you're not helpless, Paige. I've never met anyone more capable. She smiled faintly. Careful flattery like that might go to my head. It's not flattery if it's true. The bourbon warmed my chest as thunder rolled again, more distant now. Paige's apartment felt different at night, more intimate, the spaces between objects somehow smaller. Will Athena be afraid of storms too? She asked. She's shown no anxiety in testing, but we can never predict everything. I hesitated. Dogs are like people. Sometimes they develop fears we don't expect. What are you afraid of? The question came softly. I stared at my glass. Failing people who depend on me. Paige's hand found mine in the darkness, her touch sure and deliberate. Is that why you live alone? Except for Liam now? Maybe. I'd never discussed this with anyone. My last relationship ended because I spent more time with my trainees than at home. That's dedication, not failure. Another flash of lightning illuminated her face momentarily. In that brief glow, I saw a depth of understanding that made my chest tighten. "What about you?" I asked. "What scares you?" She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. "Forgetting," she finally said. "Forgetting what colors look like. Forgetting my mother's face. Losing the visual memories I still have." The vulnerability in her admission made something shift between us. We talked for hours as the storm gradually subsided, about her accident, about my parents' expectations, about dreams deferred and new ones discovered. She told me about waking up in the hospital 5 years ago, knowing immediately that her sight was gone. The hardest part wasn't the darkness. It was people treating me like I'd disappeared along with my vision. "Is that why you stayed at the museum?" "Partly," she smiled. "Also because I'm stubborn as hell." As the conversation drifted toward childhood memories, her eyelids grew heavy. I watched as she fought to stay awake, her head gradually tilting toward my shoulder. "You should sleep," I whispered. "Stay," she murmured, already drifting off. "Just until morning. Apollo might need you." I gently adjusted a throw pillow behind her head as she curled on the couch. "I'll be right here." In the quiet aftermath of the storm, I watched her sleep. Her face, usually animated with expression, was peaceful now. A strand of hair had fallen across her cheek, and I resisted the urge to brush it away, afraid of waking her. Something dangerous was happening inside me, something that transcended professional boundaries and friendly affection. Sitting there in the dim light of her apartment, Apollo's steady breathing mixing with the gentle sound of rain, I admitted to myself what I'd been avoiding for weeks. I was falling in love with Paige Baker. The realization should have sent me running for the door. Instead, I found myself sinking deeper into her couch, listening to her breathe, memorizing the curve of her jaw and the way her fingers curled slightly when she slept. Dawn found me still watching over them both, my heart full of impossible wishes and professional ethics warring with emotions I couldn't, and didn't want to, control. "You're distracted today," Paige noted, as her fingers moved across the specialized harness I'd brought for our final Athena training session. "Long morning," I said, watching her hands work the buckles with growing confidence. 3 months had passed since our first meeting, and in 2 weeks, Athena would officially become Paige's guide dog. The thought left me with a complicated blend of professional pride and personal dread. Without our regular training sessions, I'd have no legitimate reason to see her 3 times a week. Liam was up late working on college applications, I added, which was at least partly true. My brother had finally started considering his future, inspired largely by conversations with Paige during our museum visits. "That's wonderful progress," she said, beaming. "Art school?" "Architecture, actually. Your Roman aqueduct explanations made quite an impression." We were finishing our session in the park near her apartment when a voice called from behind us. "Paige? Is that you?" She froze, her entire body tensing. The man approaching wore an expensive suit that seemed at odds with the casual park setting. Tall, conventionally handsome, the kind of person accustomed to people noticing him. "Derek," she said, her voice suddenly stripped of its usual warmth. He reached for her free hand, clasping it between both of his before she could object. "God, it's been what, 3 years? You look amazing." I stood awkwardly to the side, Athena alert beside me as Apollo shifted protectively closer to Paige. "This is Trinity Henderson," Paige said, extracting her hand from his grip. "My guide dog trainer. Trinity, this is Derek Warner. My ex." The ex-boyfriend. I'd heard his name only once, when Paige mentioned he had conveniently disappeared after her accident. My immediate dislike must have shown on my face because his smile faltered when he turned to me. "Pleasure," he said without meaning it. "Mind if I steal her for a coffee? Old time's sake?" Everything in me wanted to object, but Paige nodded before I could speak. "I have some time. Trinity, we're finished for today, right?" "Absolutely," I managed, professional mask firmly in place. "Same time tomorrow for Athena's bus navigation training?" "Looking forward to it." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I watched Derek place his hand on the small of her back as they walked away, a gesture of possession that made my jaw clench. Apollo glanced back at me once, almost apologetically, before following them. That night, Liam found me aggressively kneading bread dough in the kitchen, flour covering every available surface. "What did that dough ever do to you?" he asked, stealing a pinch. "I'm experimenting with gluten development," I lied. "Sure. Nothing to do with the 10 times you've checked your phone in the last hour?" I glared at him. "Don't you have trigonometry to fail?" Ouch. He hopped onto the counter. "This is about museum lady, isn't it? Her name is Paige. The same Paige who called while you were in the shower?" He held my flour-covered phone between 2 fingers. "Said she needs to talk to you. Sounded important." I grabbed the phone, heart racing. When Paige picked up, the background noise suggested she was at a restaurant. "Trinity? Can we meet tomorrow morning, before our training session?" "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Yes, no, I'm not sure. It's about Derek." She lowered her voice. "He wants to try again. Us, I mean." The dough beneath my hands deflated. "Oh. I need a friend's perspective." The word friend stung more than it should have. "Breakfast at Maggie's? 8 o'clock?" I agreed, hanging up with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with the bread I'd been punishing. Maggie's diner was morning busy when I arrived, the smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. Paige was already seated in a corner booth, her fingers tracing the Braille menu, though I suspected she had it memorized. "He said he's changed," she began without preamble as I slid into the seat across from her. "That letting me go was his biggest regret." I took a slow breath. "And you believe him?" "I don't know." She set the menu aside. "We dated for 2 years before the accident. He was my department chair, actually. 12 years older, brilliant, charismatic. And then you lost your sight, and he lost interest," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Her mouth tightened. "He said he couldn't handle it. That he wasn't strong enough to be what I needed. And now suddenly he is?" The waitress interrupted to take our orders. When she left, Paige leaned forward. "He says watching me at the museum, seeing how I've thrived, made him realize what he threw away." Her fingers played with the paper napkin, folding it with nervous precision. "That he wants another chance. How do you feel about that?" I forced myself to ask through the tightness in my throat. "Confused," she sighed. "For years I wondered what I could have done differently to make him stay. Now he's back, and instead of feeling vindicated, I feel—" "What?" "Nothing," she said softly. "I feel nothing when he touches my hand, nothing when he talks about our past. It's like listening to someone describe a movie I barely remember." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by guilt. This wasn't about me. "But," she continued, "he knows my world, academia, museum politics, the life I had before." "The life you had," I repeated carefully, "not the life you have now." Our food arrived, and we ate in weighted silence. Finally, she spoke again. "He's invited me to the annual museum fundraiser as his date." She set down her fork. "He's on the board of directors now. Says he can help secure funding for the tactile exhibits I've been proposing." The implication was clear. Derek had influence she needed professionally. I thought about the passion in her voice when she described making art accessible to everyone. How could I possibly advise her against something that might help achieve that dream? "When's the fundraiser?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "This Saturday," she hesitated. "I'd like you to come too. As my friend, I could use the moral support." Friend. There was that word again. "Of course," I said, swallowing disappointment with my cooling coffee. "That's what friends are for." I'd never felt more out of place than at the Washington Museum's annual fundraiser. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and waiters carried trays of champagne between clusters of wealthy donors. I tugged at my one decent black dress, wishing I'd opted for pants instead. Across the room, Paige stood with Derek, his hand perpetually touching her elbow, her shoulder, the small of her back. She wore a midnight blue dress that made her skin glow, her hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. Derek was introducing her to everyone as the brilliant Dr. Baker, his voice carrying that particular note of pride that suggested he somehow took credit for her accomplishments. "You're staring?" Liam said, appearing beside me with a stolen flute of champagne. I snatched it from his hand. "You're underage. And you're jealous." He grinned. "It's written all over your face." "I'm concerned," I corrected, setting the champagne aside. I don't trust him. Same difference. Liam shrugged. So do something about it. But what could I do? Paige was an adult making her own choices. I had no claim on her beyond our professional relationship, which was nearly concluded. Athena was fully trained and already bonding beautifully with Paige. I watched as Derek guided her toward a group of board members. From across the room, I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw the moment Paige's smile became fixed, professional rather than genuine. Something in the set of her shoulders told me she was uncomfortable. I'm going to find the food, Liam announced. Try not to spontaneously combust while I'm gone. Left alone, I drifted closer to Paige's group, pretending to admire a nearby sculpture. Derek's voice gradually became audible. Remarkable how she manages, isn't it? Almost like a normal person. I froze, not believing what I'd just heard. The museum is fortunate to have Dr. Baker's expertise, an older woman in diamonds responded. Her accessibility initiatives have increased our attendance 15%. Of course, Derek agreed smoothly. I'm just saying it's inspirational, and with proper guidance her potential is unlimited. He lowered his voice, not realizing I was within earshot. Between us, the board position she's applying for would be largely symbolic. A statement about inclusion. She'd need significant support to actually fulfill the role. I'd heard enough. Moving deliberately, I approached their circle and touched Paige's arm. Excuse me, I said, my voice sharper than intended. Paige, could I borrow you for a moment? There's someone I'd like you to meet. The relief in her smile was immediate. If you'll excuse me, she said to the group, taking my arm. Once we were safely away, she leaned close. Thank you for the rescue. Who am I meeting? No one, I admitted. You just looked like you needed an escape. Her fingers tightened on my arm. My hero. We found a quiet alcove near the Egyptian exhibit, the very place we'd first met, and she visibly relaxed. Derek's been parading me around all evening like some rare exhibit, she sighed. I'd forgotten how exhausting these events could be. I hesitated, then asked, Paige, are you sure about him? About trying again? What do you mean? I took a deep breath. I overheard him talking to the board members. He implied you couldn't handle the position you've applied for without his help. That your role would be symbolic. Her face went carefully blank. You must have misunderstood. I wish I had. I touched her hand lightly. He used the phrase almost like a normal person. She withdrew her hand, her expression hardening. Derek has connections that could help fund programs for thousands of visually impaired people. Programs I've been fighting to implement for years. At what cost? I asked softly. That's not fair. Her voice was tight. You don't know what it's like building a career with my disability. Sometimes compromises are necessary. Compromises, yes. But not this. Not with someone who doesn't see how extraordinary you are on your own terms. You're overstepping, she said, her posture stiffening. Derek and I have history. You and I have a professional relationship that's nearly concluded. Her words hit like a physical blow. Is that all we have? A professional relationship? What else would you call it? She crossed her arms. You're my dog trainer, Trinity. I thought I was your friend. Friends don't interfere in personal decisions. They do when those decisions involve someone who abandoned you at your lowest point, and now wants to use you as his token diversity project. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd gone too far. Paige's expression shuddered completely. I think you should leave, she said quietly. Paige, I'm sorry. Please, just go. The pain in her voice made my chest constrict. I wanted to explain, to make her understand that my concern came from what? I couldn't even admit it to myself, standing there in that crowded museum, watching her turn away from me. From caring too much? From loving her? The realization hit me with stunning clarity. I loved her. Not as a client, not as a friend, but wholly, completely, in all the ways that mattered. And I was losing her. Good night, Paige, I whispered, though she had already walked away, her cane tapping a decisive rhythm across the marble floor as she returned to Derek's side. Outside in the cool night air, I sat on the museum steps, too numb to cry. Liam found me there 20 minutes later. You look like hell, he observed, dropping onto the step beside me. What happened? I ruined everything, I said simply. For once, my brother didn't have a sarcastic comeback. He just put his arm around my shoulders and sat with me in silence as the stars appeared overhead, each one a distant, unreachable point of light. A week passed with no word from Paige. I completed the final paperwork for Athena's placement, arranging for a colleague to handle the last transition meeting. The thought of seeing Paige again, cool and professional while Derek hovered nearby, was more than I could bear. "You're being ridiculous," Liam informed me, as he found me reorganizing my training equipment for the third time that day. "Just call her." I shook my head. "She made her feelings clear." "Did she? Or did you both just say things you didn't mean?" When the training center's phone rang that afternoon, I nearly jumped out of my skin. It wasn't Paige, but the museum's education coordinator asking if I'd consider bringing some trainee dogs for a children's program. "We're putting together an audio exhibition about working animals," she explained. "Dr. Baker recommended you specifically." My heart stuttered. "Paige recommended me?" "Oh yes. She's spearheading the project, quite passionate about it, said you were the best trainer she'd ever worked with." I agreed immediately, desperate for any connection, however tenuous. The following day, I arrived at the museum's education wing with 2 trainees, a golden retriever and a German shepherd. The coordinator led me to a small recording studio, where they were producing audio guides. "Perfect timing," she said. "Liam's just finishing up his session." "Liam?" I echoed, confused. She opened the door to reveal my brother sitting at a microphone, Paige beside him wearing headphones. They appeared deep in conversation, papers spread between them. "Your brother's been narrating our architectural segments," the coordinator explained. "Dr. Baker recruited him, said his voice had exactly the right quality for engaging young listeners." Before I could process this information, Liam spotted me through the glass and waved. Paige turned, her expression unreadable behind her sunglasses. "I'll leave you to it," the coordinator said, disappearing down the hallway. Liam emerged first, his expression sheepishly defiant. "Surprise? How long has this been going on?" I asked. 2 days, he shrugged. "She called asking if I'd be interested in some paid voice work, said it would look good on my college applications." "And you didn't think to mention this to me?" "She asked me not to." He had the grace to look guilty. "Said she wanted to approach you professionally about the project once we had the initial recordings done." Paige appeared in the doorway, Apollo at her side. "Hello, Trinity. I'll take the dogs to meet the sound techs," Liam said quickly, taking the leashes from my hand and escaping down the hall. We stood in uncomfortable silence until Paige spoke. "Your brother has a remarkable ear for architectural detail. The way he describes flying buttresses actually made me remember what they look like." "He's talented when he applies himself," I agreed, searching for neutral ground. Another pause stretched between us. She looked tired, dark circles visible beneath her sunglasses. "I owe you an apology," she finally said. "No, I'm the one who—" "Please, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "You were right about Derek. The night of the fundraiser after you left, I overheard him talking to the museum director. He was negotiating for a position on the acquisitions committee in exchange for managing my accessibility initiatives." My chest tightened. "Paige, I'm sorry." "Don't be. I confronted him and he didn't even have the decency to deny it." Her voice hardened. Apparently, having a blind girlfriend with a doctorate made him look progressive and compassionate to the board members he was trying to impress. "What happened?" A small, satisfied smile curved her lips. "I told him that while I might be blind, I could still recognize when someone was completely full of shit." Despite everything, I laughed. "I wish I'd seen his face." Apollo growled at him. "My loyal defender." She reached down to pat the dog's head. "Second only to you in that department." The compliment warmed me, but uncertainty still hung between us. "Why didn't you call?" "Pride, embarrassment," she sighed. "And then Liam mentioned you were taking a new placement in Baltimore." "A what?" "He said you were considering a 3-month training position with Johns Hopkins. That you might be leaving soon." I was going to murder my brother. "That was a preliminary inquiry, I never seriously." "It made me realize how much I've come to depend on you," she interrupted. "Not just professionally but personally. The thought of you leaving." Her voice trailed off, and I found myself moving closer, drawn by the vulnerability in her expression. "I'm not going anywhere," I said softly. "Even after I was so horrible to you?" You weren't horrible. I overstepped. You were being a friend. Her hand reached out, finding my arm with unerring accuracy. My best friend, actually. The contact sent warmth through me, but her words, best friend, created a complicated knot of emotions. I wanted more, but I'd take what she was offering. Is that what we are? I asked carefully. Friends? Liam chose that moment to reappear, the trainee dogs bounding ahead of him. The sound guys are ready whenever, he stopped, reading the tension between us. I'll just go back and tell them 5 more minutes. As he retreated, Paige's hand slid down my arm to find my fingers. Liam told me something else, she said quietly. Something about you. My breath caught. What did he say? He said I wasn't the only one blind around here. A smile played at the corners of her mouth. That someone had feelings they weren't admitting. I was definitely going to murder my brother, after possibly thanking him first. He talks too much, I managed. Trinity, she said softly. Is it true? I stood frozen in the narrow hallway of the museum's recording studio, Paige's question hanging between us. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain she could hear it. Is what true? I stalled, knowing exactly what she meant. That you have feelings for me. Her directness had always been refreshing until now, when it left me nowhere to hide. Liam should mind his own business, I murmured. That's not an answer. Her hand tightened on mine. Trinity, please, I need to hear it from you. A museum technician walked past, giving us a curious glance. This was hardly the place for such a conversation, yet I couldn't seem to move. Yes, I finally admitted, my voice barely audible. It's true. The silence that followed lasted only seconds, but felt eternal. Why didn't you tell me? She asked softly. You were my client. It wouldn't have been ethical. And then Derek came back and I thought, you thought I'd choose him. He's part of your old life, before the accident. I thought maybe you wanted that back. Paige shook her head slowly. I don't want to go backward, Trinity. I've spent 5 years building this new life, not despite my blindness but with it. It's part of who I am now. A flicker of hope kindled in my chest. And what do you want now? Before she could answer, the education coordinator reappeared. Dr. Baker, the director wants to discuss the perception exhibit before the board meeting. Paige nodded, professional mask sliding seamlessly into place. I'll be right there. As the coordinator walked away, she turned back to me. Come to the museum tonight, after closing. There's something I want to show you. I spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous anticipation, barely able to focus on my training sessions. Liam found me pacing our apartment that evening, changing outfits for the 3rd time. The black sweater looked fine, he commented from the doorway. Though she won't see it anyway. I threw a pillow at him. Not helpful. Seriously though, Trinity. His voice softened. She likes you, a lot, she told me. I stopped midway through pulling on a boot. She told you that? While we were recording, she asked about 1,000,000 questions about you. He grinned. It was disgusting, honestly. All, does Trinity talk about me? And what's her favorite exhibit? Why didn't you tell me? She made me promise not to. He shrugged. Something about preparing a surprise, whatever that means. At 9 o'clock, I found myself at the museum's staff entrance, heart pounding as I texted Paige that I'd arrived. Minutes later, she appeared with a security guard who nodded at me before disappearing back inside. Bernard's the night supervisor, she explained. He's giving us some privacy. Privacy for what? I asked, following her into the darkened museum. For my exhibit. She walked confidently through the familiar halls, Apollo guiding her past velvet ropes and glass cases now shrouded in shadow. I've been working on it for weeks. We passed through the main atrium into a wing I hadn't visited before. A sign over the entrance read Perceptions Beyond Sight. This is yours? I asked, surprised. My pet project. The board approved it last month. She stopped before a closed door. It opens to the public next week, but I wanted you to be the first visitor. She pushed open the door to reveal a darkened space. As we entered, subtle lights activated, illuminating an exhibit unlike any I'd seen before. Instead of the usual glass cases and placards, the room contained interactive stations with headphones, textured surfaces, and sculptures designed to be touched. It's a multisensory exhibit, Paige explained, moving to the center of the room. Art experienced through all senses except sight. With a press of a button, the room plunged into complete darkness. I felt a moment of disorientation, then Paige's hand found mine. "This is how I experience the world now," she said softly, "through touch, through sound, through presence." She guided me to different stations, sculptures that told stories through texture, sound installations that created three-dimensional spaces with audio alone, poetry in Braille that visitors were encouraged to trace with their fingers. "This is incredible," I whispered, running my fingers over a topographical map of Washington, D.C. "You created all this?" "With help." Her voice came from directly beside me now, close enough that I could feel her warmth. "But yes, it's my vision, so to speak." As we moved through the darkness, she explained each piece with the passion I'd come to cherish in her voice. Near the end of the exhibit, she stopped me before what felt like a small alcove. "This is the centerpiece," she said, placing headphones over my ears. A voice filled my ears, Paige's voice, describing the Washington Monument at sunset, the way light played across the reflecting pool, the subtle changes in the marble's color as day faded to evening. Her words painted images so vivid I could almost see them forming in the darkness. "That was how you helped me," she said when I removed the headphones, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave me back what I thought I'd lost, the ability to see beauty through someone else's eyes." "Paige," I breathed, unable to find adequate words. "The exhibit is dedicated to you," she said. "That's the surprise. Look." The lights came up slightly, revealing a small plaque on the wall. I read it aloud, "To Trinity, who taught me that vision comes in many forms. Thank you for helping me see again." Tears pricked my eyes as I turned to face her. She had removed her sunglasses, her green eyes finding my general direction with remarkable accuracy. "I've been blind in more ways than one," she said softly. "Too afraid to admit what I was feeling for you." My breath caught. "And what are you feeling?" In answer, she stepped closer, her hands finding my face with gentle precision. Her fingers traced my features as if memorizing them, thumbs brushing across my cheekbones, down to the corner of my mouth. "I'm feeling this," she whispered, and leaned in to kiss me. "You're sure about this?" I asked Paige, watching her direct the movers with confident precision as they carried boxes into our new home. 6 months had passed since that first kiss in her museum exhibit, 6 months of discovery, adjustment, and building a life together. Today marked the official beginning of our cohabitation in a craftsman-style house at the edge of Washington, with enough yard space for my training needs and proximity to the museum for Paige's work. "I've never been more certain of anything," she replied, her fingers intertwined with mine. "Though I'm still convinced you're getting the worse end of this deal, living with both me and Apollo, plus whatever trainees you bring home." "Don't forget Athena," I reminded her. Now fully certified, the Black Lab had become Paige's constant companion, though Apollo remained a beloved family member in semi-retirement. "A house full of dogs and a blind girlfriend. Your parents must be thrilled." I laughed, pulling her close. "My mother's exact words were, 'Finally someone who appreciates your obsession with those animals.'" The transition had been surprisingly smooth. My training business had expanded to include specialized work with service dogs for various disabilities, while Paige's Perceptions exhibit had become so successful that the museum had approved funding for a permanent installment. Liam appeared in the doorway, carrying what looked like the heaviest box he could find, just to prove he could handle it. At 18, he'd been accepted to 3 architecture programs, ultimately choosing one in Washington to stay close to us. "If you two are done being disgustingly cute, where does this box of rocks go?" he asked, exaggerating his struggle. "Those are my Braille books, smartass," Paige replied. "Home office, left side." He grinned and disappeared down the hallway. The easy friendship that had developed between them was one of the unexpected joys of our relationship. Later that evening, with the movers gone and boxes half unpacked around us, I found Paige sitting on our back deck. The training area I'd designed was taking shape in the yard, a space where I could work from home more often. "Penny for your thoughts," I said, handing her a glass of wine. "I was just thinking about that day at the museum when we first met." She smiled, taking the glass. "How annoyed I was when Vega crashed into me." "Best accident of my life," I replied, settling beside her. though I still maintain she did it on purpose. Greatest matchmaker in canine history. Paige laughed, then grew contemplative. Did you ever think we'd end up here? Not in my wildest dreams. I gazed at our yard, picturing the future unfolding before us. Though I hoped, from that first Thursday tour when you corrected the museum guide about those burial urns. You fell for my archaeological knowledge? How romantic. I fell for all of you, I said softly. Your brilliance, your determination, your ability to navigate a world not designed for you with more grace than most people manage in ideal circumstances. She found my hand in the growing twilight. And I fell for the way you see me, not as someone broken or inspiring or brave, just as Paige. The summer night enveloped us in gentle warmth as we sat in comfortable silence. In the distance, the lights of Washington created a soft glow against the darkening sky. I have something for you, I said finally. A housewarming gift. I placed a small velvet box in her hand. Her fingers explored its contours with practiced precision before opening it to discover a ring inside. A replica of an ancient Egyptian design I'd commissioned from the museum's artisan. It's a promise ring, I explained as her fingers traced its intricate pattern. Based on designs from the exhibit where we met, the hieroglyphs mean eternal vision, seeing beyond ordinary sight. Trinity, she whispered, emotion catching in her throat. The jeweler embedded tiny dots in the pattern, I continued, guiding her fingers. It's your name in Braille, worked into the design. A tear slipped down her cheek as she slid the ring onto her finger. It's perfect. Like you, I said, kissing her softly. Hardly perfect, she laughed against my lips. Just perfectly matched to you. As night fell completely, we remained on the deck, planning our future between kisses. Paige described her new museum initiative for children with disabilities, while I shared ideas for expanding my training program to include therapy dogs for trauma survivors. Inside the house, Apollo and Athena settled on their new beds. Liam's music drifted from the guest room he'd occupy until college began, and unpacked boxes awaited our attention. But out here, under the stars she couldn't see but could feel in the night's cooling air, we created our own universe. One where vision came in many forms, and love needed no translation. You know, Paige said thoughtfully, when I lost my sight, I thought I'd never truly see beauty again. And now? She turned toward me, her face illuminated by the soft porch light, eyes finding mine with that uncanny precision that still amazed me. Now I understand that the most important things were never visible to begin with.